This video is split into 10 parts. The guide used in this video will be down in the description. So let's get started. To get started, first open your terminal and check if our system is EFI. If you do not get this, then you need to reinstall your Linux system. After that, we should try and update our BIOS. Highly recommended, so get your USB stick and update your BIOS. To enter the BIOS, we can type systemctl reboot -- firmware and hit enter. Once the update is done, we go back to our BIOS and we enable our features for virtualization. Now for AMD is SVM, NX, and then Iommu. For Intel it is VTD and VTX. Now if you can remember, you can go back to the wiki and in step 1 preparations it'll show what you need to enable. Now that we have rebooted and enabled our virtualization configurations, we can now proceed with editing Grub. To edit Grub, open terminal and sudo nano etc default /grub. If you're confused where your grub is for your distro, click on it, follow this here, just read it, and you'll be fine. In my case, I'm using Arch Linux, so I will use that. Now, to add the parameters to Grub, come to this line here and add your parameter. Now, I have an AMD CPU, so I will use AMD. For both AMD and Intel, you guys want to add this. Now, on the wiki here, this is for AMD GPU users. This just fixes some errors for the virtual machine to boot. So save your file and exit, and then update Grub. Again, if you're confused what your update Grub is, come down here and check. So for Pop! OS, it's a bit different than Manjaro. And again, now we reboot. So we just came back from rebooting and now we're in step 3 on this wiki. Checking your Iommu groups. These are very important, I must say. So if you take this script here and paste that into a terminal, like this, and the full screen, it'll give you a bunch of output here. To explain how to use this knowledge, what you need to know are some rules. So anything alone is typically the best for virtual machine usage. If something's bunched up, you need to pass through the whole group for it to work. So for a virtual machine to boot, we need at least our GPU. And by looking at my groups here, here's my GPU. I also see that my Ethernet is alone, which is perfect. My USB controller, an audio device. Now I do see here that I have 2 more USB controllers. So for those to work, I'd need to pass through these 2 guys as well to the virtual machine. There is an exception to this rule, and that is any bridge type. So in my case, for this to actually work, these 2 USB controllers, I'd only have to pass through this guy here. I can ignore this one. So if this was something else and not bridge, you need to put them all into the virtual machine for it to work. So in this guide, I will be using my GPU, my USB controller here, my audio device here, and these two more USB controllers. If your groups are bunched up in one big group, there's one thing we can try, and it's called the ACS patch. Now basically what it would do is anything in a group like this, it would try and break them down into single pieces like this. So if you do not have good groups, try ACS patch. Now the best way to get the ACS patch is by installing the stand kernel. So installing the stand kernel will be different for every distro, so make sure you do your research on that part. Now I'm gonna just install it quickly for my Manjaro install. Now that I have the stand kernel installed, proof, oh, there we go, I'm on the stand kernel, and now what you want to do is sudo nano, and we edit the grub file again, and then we add this. I'll leave this in the description down below so you can copy and paste that. Save the file and update grub again, and then reboot. So I rebooted, and I shall check my groupings now. Holy moly, so as you can see, like everything got broken down even more. So that's how the ACS patch works, and I did not think it would be this good. So yeah, it makes my life easier. Now the only thing you might need to worry about is how the GPU is broken down into its own groups. So if your GPU has two IDs, you gotta look for them and just keep track of which group they're in. It makes it easier for setting up the virtual machine later. Okay, now that that is done, we can start configuring Libvirt. Now again, for your distro, just click the link. Of course, Manjaro is an Arch based, so we'll do that. I already have the packages installed, so I'll click no. But if you're running on Arch, it will ask you to replace a package, and you want to hit yes. Here it is, the IP tables and the IP tables NFT. You want to click yes. You want to replace it. This is only for Arch based. Everything else, they don't have that. Cool. So once those packages are done, let's go back to the wiki and edit our file. So you're going to come down to Unix sock underscore group and uncheck it. What I mean by unchecking is usually it has a hashtag in front, and unchecking just means removing that. Then same goes for the RW, not the RO, the RW perms. Now before we exit this file, you want to go all the way down and paste these two lines in. They can also be found here on the wiki. This is for creating log files later on, and it helps us a lot with troubleshooting if something were to go wrong. So once you have that added in at the very bottom of the file, you can save and leave. Now we just run these commands. Now this is for all distros. Then of course enable Libvirt. then start it, and here we check the groups. So what we need to look for is KVM, Libvirt, and then your username. Mine is AA6, of course. If that's done, now you can edit the Iommu file. Now in this file, we are looking for user. And again, you want to uncheck user and group. And also, in the colons in here, you want to change your username. So I believe in my case, it was Iommu. Just remove that and add your username. Don't forget to save the file and exit. Once you have that done, you can... Oh boy, what am I doing? You can restart Libvirt. Now, this is for a virtual network. Now, if you remember, in my case, everything in my groups got broken down into their own groups. So I know for a fact I will be using my Ethernet controller. So if you can't do Ethernet controller or your network controller, then you should. Unless you are SSHing back to your Linux install from the virtual machine. I wouldn't know why you want to do that, but hey, just a heads up. So we'll close this. So I'm not gonna run these commands here. You can if you want. Now we're on to step 5, actually creating that virtual machine. Now, here are 2 different methods of setting up a virtual machine, or at least for the storage. So one is emulated storage. So your Windows gets installed on a emulated partition, or if you have a physical disk lying around, like an SSD or a hard drive, you can use that instead. So today I will be showing both ways of doing it, so nobody gets confused about it. So for the people that are doing emulated drive, you're going to come to step 5 and download the Virt-IO drivers. Click here and click this, and it's going to download. Now I already have it downloaded, so I'm going to cancel that. Then you also want your Windows 10 ISO. Now, in my case, I have a modified version of Windows that I wish to install. You can use whatever you want if you know it's trusted. So you are at your own risk there. Once you have the ISOs installed, you can open Virt-manager. And if you have done everything correctly so far, this window should be popping up without needing to enter in your root password. If you need to enter in your root password, you did something wrong, and do everything again. So once this is open, click the big plus in the top left and hit local install media. Click forward. Now we're going to browse. Now you guys won't have this, so you're going to have to click browse again. And here is my custom Windows. Now if you're also doing this, your program or operating system won't get detected. So you have to click this and then type in Win10. If you're using the official ISO, this will come up automatically. Now for always installing the virtual machine, I always give it half. Now for people who plan on doing emulated and physical, you both want to uncheck this. So uncheck that. Check this, very important, and leave the name 110. You can change it, but it does mean you will need to change it in a script later on. So just keep it, it's fine. Now I'll click no, since I'm not using virtual network. So here some people might differ again. Let me scroll down. There is still something missing here. So if you're on Ubuntu, this the .fd you're looking for, or Debian, Arch, or whatever, we're looking for this one. For Fedora, I believe it was basically the same as this, but I think there was like sec boot behind here somewhere. I'm trying to get Worms Tweaker to update this, but I don't know. He seems very busy. So since I'm on Arch, I'll look for this. There we go, and hit apply. CPUs, that's fine. Enable boot menu. Hit apply. If you're not using NIC, you need to remove this before you begin your install. Now that we have everything set up, or almost everything set up for the install, we now want to add the storage. So this only goes for people who are doing emulated storage. So I'm going to use 40 gigabytes for an example. Then in bus type, change that to VirtIO. And then click finish. Then for emulated people again, select here, because we need to select the VirtIO drivers. So in my case it's in documents, but if it's somewhere else for you, again, browse local. Before you hit finish, change this type to CD-ROM for your VirtIO driver and hit finish. Now for the people who plan on using a physical disk. So just make sure you have a physical disk available for you. So in my case, I'll be using SDA2. It is a partition of a disk. Before you boot up the virtual machine, you need to format it as NTFS so that Windows will recognize it. If you don't, you'll have a few issues. So just format that. And then take note of the device name. So since we know the device name now, here we just type in SDA2. Now if it was a whole drive, you could do SDA or SDA1 if it was one big partition, but in my case it's a smaller partition. Again, make sure this is on SATA and hit finish. And now you're good to go. Click begin install. So let's say you missed that menu or opportunity to press the key. It might bring you here. So press exit or type exit and enter. Using your arrow keys, we'll go to boot manager. Now to tell the difference apart the CD-ROMs that we added, the second one that we added will always have the 3 at the end. So if you followed the guide correctly, you also should have added your Windows ISO first. So this will be the one we're selecting. and then we hit enter again for the Windows install. So let's pretend we read that. Now, as you can see, one is missing. Excuse me. So for the people who are using physical drives, you're good to go. Click this and click next and install. For people who are using emulated drives, click load driver, click browse, scroll down and look for CD drive Virt-IO win. Expand that. And then come under AMD 64. Now don't get confused with AMD 64, this is for both CPUs, AMD and Intel. And then choose 110 and hit next. As you see, it has now popped up for our installer. So I will be installing on the 40GB one because my NVMe is way quicker than my hard drive. So I'm going to just time lapse this real quick and then shut down the VM. Now, there was a small issue. It booted from the CD-ROM again. I can't seem to leave. There we go. Pressing Control and Alt will allow your mouse to come back out if it was like that. Come over here, go to boot options, and I forgot to check the disk that you're using. Now of course I am using the Virt-IO disk. If you're using the physical disk, check the SATA and then move it up so it's first, and you can boot up again. So I'll shut this down now, as I did boot. And then we're ready on to go to the next step. So let me minimize this here. And I need to go back to step 3 because I want to see my groupings again. There we go. Before we do anything, click Edit, Preferences, and enable XML editing and close. You might need to relaunch the application for it to take effect. Open your VM and head over here. Now I'm going to remove SATA disk since I didn't use it, and I just like keeping things nice and organized. So to get started, click on tablet and click remove. We'll remove anything we can. Other than the Virt-IO serial. So we cannot remove these two. So the way to remove these is to click XML, scroll all the way down, and when these two are always left, you are looking for graphics all the way down the video here with the slash in front. Delete all that and hit apply. Perfect. Now we can add our graphics card. So if you have 2 IDs for your graphics card, then you're only looking for 2 IDs. If you have 4 like I do, you'll have to add all 4. So I'm gonna go do that real quick. Don't worry about the window that just popped up. This is telling me that it's already being used by a different VM. That is now our GPU added. Now, since the ACS patch did a wonderful job, I'm now going to add the USB controllers, the 3 of them, and then the audio device, and Ethernet. Can't forget about that. So again, add hardware, and these will all be found in the PCI host device. Now let's say you weren't that lucky to get your USB controller alone or in a decently small group. The other way to add USB devices to a virtual machine is by using USB host device. Now there are pros and cons with USB controllers and this, but typically USB controllers are the best if you can do it. We're now preparing for a ROM file. Now typically this is only for NVIDIA. Some AMD cards need one, but for AMD users of this video, I'd highly recommend you guys to do this at the very end of the video. This is mainly for NVIDIA. So there are 3 options to dump your ROM. For this guide, I'll go with option 1 since it's the best option. That is to dump your own ROM. It's safe, you're not destroying your GPU, so you guys don't need to be scared. So again, if you're NVIDIA, download NVIDIA. If you're AMD, download AMD. Then download this. And then we'll just extract it here. You can open this. Now, don't worry about all the files in here. We are only looking for x64 since that is our system. Once we're in here, we can open a terminal, type ls, and we see it's not executable. So sudo chmod plus x nv flash. There we go. Now, at this point, if you're here, then I'd recommend you guys to pull up a phone so you can follow along on the wiki. The reason why I say this is because to extract your ROM file, we are removing the whole desktop environment, GPU drivers, so all we would be seeing is a few lines of code in a new session. So let me get that prepared. So basically what you do here is open a new TTY with Control Alt F2. If F2 doesn't work, try 3, 4, 5, 6 and so on. So if you're using GNOME, you're most likely using GDD or GDM and you want to stop that as a service. You might need to stop SDDM and LightDM. Here's my TTY session. Our first goal is to stop our display manager. Now, mine is GDM and I'm using systemctl to stop that. Whenever I stopped it, my TTY froze, so I had to swap to a different one. That could be your case as well. But yeah, once we logged in again, we can finally unload those NVIDIA drivers. There is an order to doing them, which I'll see if I can put at the bottom of the screen in the edit so you can follow along. Or if you're unsure, just check on the wiki. once we have the NVIDIA drivers unloaded, we need to unload one more module, which would allow us to finally save our ROM file. Now to save our ROM file, we need to cd into our download folder and then cd into the NVFlash folder that we extracted. And then when we're in that folder, we cd again into the x64. Once we're in that folder, we can now run sudo and then /nvflash. Then we do space -- or -- save, and then we name our ROM file anything we'd like. So in my case, I used rtx2080.rom, and then once that's done, just do a quick reboot. It's quicker than having to load all the drivers again. So we're back in our install now after extracting the ROM file. Let's open a terminal and we'll cd into our downloads, just like this. Now, I typed ls just to make sure that the ROM file is there, and as you see, it is. Now, we need to install a hex editor and remove some code. This is not needed for AMD GPUs, only NVIDIA. So if you're using AMD GPU, you do not need to edit your ROM file. All you need was to dump it. So if you are an NVIDIA user, you need to download a hex editor. Now the one from my choice is Orteta. I hope I said that right. So install that. Now it could be different for every system, but that's the one I prefer. Now we open with sudo Orteta RTX 2080 Super. The reason why we open is because this ROM file doesn't have user permissions yet. So once you open this up, I do apologize, my themes are kind of glitching out. Just make sure it says INS at the bottom here. Press Ctrl F, change hex to char for character, and type in video and enter. Now, as you see, it highlights the word video, and we're looking for the first U in front of it. Here we are. Now we want to delete everything in front of this U. So, put your cursor in front of the U and delete everything that's above. Quickest way to do that, to highlight all that, is Control Shift and pressing the home key and then backspace. If you did everything correct, it should say 55 and then U on this side. Now you can save. Now you're done with that. So let's open up the wiki again, and at the very bottom of step 6 you will see this, placing your ROM. Now if you're using a Fedora system, yours is down here, or Nubara, or any system with SE Linux. If you're using everything else, then most likely you're using AppArmor. So we just follow these steps here. We'll make this folder. Now I already have this folder, so I'm not going to create that. Now the best way to move your ROM to the folder, or what I would do, is instead of copying, I would move it. So I type sudo mv to move, then the ROM into the Vega BIOS, and enter. Now we can cd into user share Vega BIOS or VGA BIOS, and then run these commands here. Sudo chmod r660 and then your ROM file name. Again, change the ROM file name, and the same here for your username. There we go, and do that. So we take this line here. This only needs to be done for your first GPU ID. Come to source right here and paste it in. Now just add the right directory and the file name, and we should be good to go. And now hit apply. Now we can go into step 7. This is the easy part. This whole tutorial. So I have a folder to git clone into. If you don't, just put it in your download folder. And then copy this command here. Now we can cd into that folder and type ls. Now just make sure make the install underscore hook.sh an executable. So again, chmod plus x install and then the name. Now what we want to do is use sudo /install and then tab and hit enter. So one more thing before we do a test boot. For NVIDIA users who have a 10 series or a 20 series, we need something additional in our XML for us to install the drivers. So we copy all of this, click copy, open your Win10, head to overview and then XML. Select features here, go all the way down to VM port. Do not select this here or else you'll get an error, and then paste over it. And then you can hit apply. Now we're set for NVIDIA drivers to be installed. Now if you are using a laptop, you might need to emulate a battery, so check this out here. And then here as well. You can uncheck this here in your CPU before you boot. Now, socket is always 1. That means like how many CPUs do you have on your motherboard? So majority is 1. Cores is how many cores you have. In my case, I have 12. You might have 4, 8, 16. If there's one with 16. Now threads, normally you put in like 24 if you have 12 cores, but here it is actually per core. So 2 threads per core is 24. So don't give it too much. And then hit apply. Just set up your CPU configuration correctly before you test boot. Now, some AMD users also need something extra for the CPU. So I will paste that in. This line here is found on the wiki in step 9, right here. You need to copy this and paste that in there and hit apply. Now, for Intel CPUs, you might need to do this, pasting that line in. But yeah, if you've done everything correct up to this point, your virtual machine should boot without a issue. Once you know it boots, you can change the rest of your configs to give it more resources. So I could give this guy 30 gigabytes now instead of just 16. And hit apply. Now, what I'm going to do here now is just pull up my phone and record that it worked successfully. So the boot was successful. So now, if everything worked and the shutdown worked just fine, then that's amazing. If, however, your boot was not successful, you can do two things. One is you can look for the answer yourself, or two, you can join the Discord. I'll leave a link to it in the description. And I'll show you the best way to ask for help in the server. So in support 2 here, when you have an error, you can find the log files. If you click computer, var, log, Libvirt, and here we go. Here are your log files. So the first one would obviously be the Windows 10. So if you put that in there, go back, put in the custom hook, go back and put in the Libvirt hook. Now this one's too big, but that's because I've used my virtual machine quite a bit, so the file size is way bigger than it should be. In your case, you should be able to upload this, no problem. So once you have that in there, either you got a black screen when you tried to boot, it froze, or it kicked you back to Linux. So I'll go with the black screen now. If you got a black screen, then type here are logs when VM boots I get a black screen. This would help someone like me who tries to help people in the server figure out what the issue is more quickly. If you didn't get a black screen and it said when it kicks you back to Linux, say it kicks you back to Linux. Oh, kicks me back to Linux. Now let's say it wasn't a black screen or it didn't boot you back to Linux. Then the issue might have been Libvirt. And the way to fix that was to do a reboot and then try booting the virtual machine again. Now, if you don't want to ask for help on the server, what you can do is, or I can show you how you can read your own log files and figure out what is wrong. So let us cd into var log libvirt. Now this is where all your logs will be placed. First, we will cd into QEMU, as checking the Windows log is always the best for now. So to open it, we use sudo nano and then win10.log. And now we scroll all the way down, or page all the way down. So you might see an error like this. This is, so it, basically what it means is I cannot reset device. That's more of an error when you try shutting down the Windows machine and you try and go back to Linux. I had a black screen. So to fix this, it's saying that this device here cannot get reset because it is owned by something else. So let's open up the wiki and we're going to check our groups to see what device that is. So group 21 is not owned, and what that means is it is not added to your virtual machine. Group 21. So it's asking us to add this to the virtual machine. So I will go ahead and do that. There we go. Now group 31 this time. Oh, hold on. What was that? It was this here. Sometimes it needs these extra IDs or PCI devices. So just give it to the virtual machine. It shouldn't be a problem. And there we go. Now we fix that issue. So now whenever we shut down the virtual machine, our devices will get reset, meaning we'll be able to go forward and back between Windows and Linux. Now we can close this. And we can leave here. Let's go back to the Libvirt log. Sudo nano Libvirt. Now this is a big file. Mine's even bigger because I booted quite a few times already. So usually there would be an error down here if something went wrong with your Libvirt. Now as you see, I don't really see anything here. Everything looks good. It all says debug and no error. So an example of an error here would be, it would tell you about your ROM file, or if you're missing devices for something to boot. And what I mean by that is, I'll try to give an example. So our GPU has 4 IDs, right? The 0.0, 0.1, 0.2, and the 0.3. Now let's say I forgot to add one of these. It will tell us in this log file. It will tell us that we're missing this device and that it needs to be added for the virtual machine to boot. And we can leave this file. Now, there is one more called the custom hooks. Typically, this one's not as important. Usually best to check this out last. This looks very confusing. But the only thing we are looking for here is begin of startup. Here it is. So I'm going to just highlight it for now. Begin of startup. These are the automated scripts doing their job. It's stopping our display manager, unbinding our GPU. You can ignore this. This is not important. That's just a weird bug currently. You can ignore that. If it says like it can read a line from the teardown or the startup VFIO.sh, that's most likely a frame buffer issue, and you might see that if you disabled your frame buffer. So if you remember in step 2, if you added this, that might be the reason why it's coming up, so no need to be alarmed. But yeah, typically you don't really see many errors in here. So if there was an error that I did not talk about today, what you can do is you can copy it, join the Discord, and just search the error up here. But yeah, that's about it. If you have any questions again, leave them down below, or read the whole wiki again. So yeah, take care.